these are important for the connections are important for the kids to start thinking about themselves in whatever situation, from parents to teachers. There's a guy out of here. I've never heard of this. University of Washington. Anyone? I don't know. Somewhere it must be somewhere in Washington. Go Cougs, by the way.
Welcome to Learning Out Loud, where we get curious about all things teaching and learning. I'm Stefan, a regional technology coach, here with Andy, a regional math coordinator, and Carrie, a regional science coordinator. We're just three educators on a mission to dig into what works, what doesn't, and what we're still figuring out. This podcast is for teachers, coaches, and leaders who want to grow in their professional practice. We don't have all the answers, but we're asking the questions and recording the process. Let's go to work. Yeah, let's have Terry and Shanna introduce themselves. So I think they're really regretting it right now because we've spent the last 8 minutes just kind of screwing around. And
I was trying to help. I was telling them what the flow was. And
all right, so I spent the last 8 minutes just screwing around, which I think actually Terry and Shanna probably just expected. So we have Terry Govea and Shanna Brooks, who we work alongside with on the teaching and learning team, student success and learning, whatever we're called at the ESD. And they're going to talk about we're about to start digging into chapter 14. We decided chapter 14. So Terry, you're highest up on my screen right now. So you have to go first. And technically, no, I was about to say it's alphabetical, but it's not.
Not at all. Sorry, not alphabetical.
Yeah, right in front of the regional literacy coordinator. Wah, wah. All right, Terry, who are you and what do you do?
All right, I'm Terry Govea. I'm an instructional specialist at the ESD and also a preschool through 12th grade GLAD trainer.
Aren't you like one of 8 preschool GLAD trainers or something?
I think there's not very many. There's like 8, and there's only, I think, 5 people in the States that are preschool through 12th grade GLAD trained.
Like the whole United States?
Mm-hmm.
Not state Washington?
You're a unicorn, and we have you.
Yep, Kathy and I.
Oh, that's right. There's both of you. Mm-hmm. And Kathy, who, for the record, didn't refuse to be here, but soft refused to be here because she's like, we really tried to rope her in last time we were all together. Like, Kathy, you'd be great. Wouldn't it be fun? And she said, Terry would be awesome at this. Just classic deflection. All right, Shanna, who are you?
Well, I am the OG, Shanna Brooks, Regional Literacy Coordinator. I've been at the ESD for 17 years, so I was the first regional coordinator in our ESD and one of the first in the state. So it's fun because I get to play the historian and, then just feign like, oh, I don't remember because I'm too old to remember that. That's my line lately. I'm not sure. I'm too old. I don't remember that, but. So I've been doing mostly elementary, middle school literacy work with the ESD, and I'm a GLAD trainer along with Terry and Kathy, and not preschool, just regular big kid GLAD. So I have had so much fun this fall, spending time with both Terry and Kathy. We've been out doing team tasks in our school districts, working with teachers. So it's been a lot of fun traveling with them this fall. You hear all the stories.
Well, thank you both for being here. And I said Terry was a unicorn, but Shanna, I like that you're the OG. Are you the last of the first regional?
I am the last of the first. I am the last of the first. Yeah, the original OG Cheryl over in the Capitol retired this summer. So,
well, thank you all for joining us. And are we ready to kind of kick this thing off a little bit? And in our following our norms, I'm going to throw out a question that I haven't prompted you with.
because that's usually, it just popped in my head as I was thinking about this chapter of witnessing the good. So if you have pencil, paper, if you want to jot something down or just want to brainstorm, that's okay too. But just, I'm going to try to get the question right too. So what are some strategies? What are some noticings that reflections of yourself, or maybe it's a situation or whatever, but where you really have noticed that you have a belief in yourself that you could do something, that you have, maybe it's job related, maybe it's personal, but there's a belief like where that, like, I can do this. What does that feel like? What did that look like for you individually? And if there's, I'm just going to throw that out there and just maybe start off our conversation about that.
So I was teaching second and third grade combined class out in Palisades several years ago. And the principal walked in. I don't know if he was there to do a formal evaluation or if he was just walking through my classroom, because you had to walk through my classroom to get places. That's the joy of little tiny schools, right? And my kids we had this process every morning when we did kind of learn about, grammar and things like that. A little paper that we worked on. It's published. I can't remember what it's called right now. Daily oral language. We were doing that. And I had taught the kids to say things like this. Well, I agree with Miguel because I also think that the sentence needs to start with a capital. Right. And then we go to the next thing and somebody would say, well, I disagree with Maria because I think that word doesn't need to be capitalized or whatever it was. Right. So the principal walks through and he's like, how are they doing that? Like, he was astounded that my multilingual, mostly Spanish speaking students were actually, turning and using that type of language with each other. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I taught them how to do it. Mm-hmm. And to me, it was like, doesn't everybody do this? Right. And it was kind of one of those things I thought, okay, I guess I got one thing figured out, right? How to get my kids to talk to each other, at least at that initial level, right? It was just interesting because he was so astounded that my kids were actually talking and using complete sentences. And I was like, well, I taught them to do that. So, I don't know.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to add on or talk about a feeling or a characteristic or another example of where you've really had some belief inside yourself?
Well, I have the opportunity to work with a lot of beginning teachers through the BEST grant. And I've been in this game a really long time, but I think sharing stories of when we all started out, and I love this story. I come from a long line of teachers. I mean, I really should have, had to step up in this, but during my student teaching, my very first observation from my university professor, and he called and set up an appointment, and I thought, okay, I'm going to give a spelling test. That will be super easy. Very directed. We'll do this. And so I started out, the kids numbered their paper, put their names on it, 5th grade. And so the first word number 1, respect. Respect is an important part of every classroom. RESPECT, respect. I spelt 4 words for them before one of the students raised his hand and said, Miss Gear, would you spell that one again a little more slowly? I didn't get it. And I realized I was spelling every word on the spelling test. And oh my gosh. So I just love to tell teachers that, there's going to be those times when it happens, and it's all part of learning. And it was so funny because my university professor was supposed to pop in and do some surprise observations. He never once surprised me. He would always call me the week before and say, this is when I'm coming, Terry. So I just think teaching is an art that we're learning all the time, and we all mess up for sure.
Cool. Bill, thanks for sharing those stories. It was, I wanted to start with this belief, and then Stefan and Carrie, if you want to jump in sometime too, but this idea that the chapter 14 starts off with this quote around finding some belief in ourselves. And once we do that, then we can expand. And the quote talks about risking, risk curiosity or wondering or, putting yourself out there. And I think all of us jumping from the classroom to this role that we're here in the ESD took a little bit of a risk, but we were able to do that because of those belief systems and those things that you said that, hey, I can do this. I want to help others or share my story with others. And so that was this idea about witnessing the good in our classroom is kind of the topic or this idea. And if you're listening here, you're thinking about it like, yeah, it's exactly what you think it is. And we're going to discuss that a little bit today. There's a cool example they talk about this, and it is the holiday season, December 1st. So, we can talk about this idea of they bring up this idea of a Christmas cactus in a classroom that was really just always shifting its leaves or focusing towards the sunlight and always looking to get that warmth, the sunlight to get those ideas. And then the teacher had to move it around a little bit. And they brought that up here, this idea about thinking that, well, students are also the same way, that they crave that sunlight, that attention. And sometimes the attention is viewed as a behavior, a misbehavior, really, like I want to be corrected. And so that's how I get my attention. And this chapter really talks a little bit about these ideas about how do we just notice and evaluate the good and call those things out and maybe have a ratio that's more of a positive attributes versus negative attributes. And if you, what I wanted to bring that up there is like there's two things that really caught my eye, of this idea about top down and bottom up attention. And then as we started going through that part, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, I think I know what that means. And then I started reading a little bit about what Jim Knight talks about here, thinking about all those things that when we bottom up attention, or is that we get when something that we can't help not noticing, right? So the idea that we walk into a room and we smell smoke, right? I taught science and math, okay, smoke in a classroom is usually a bad sign, and we got to figure out where it came from. But we had to then jump in there and say, ooh, that caught my attention, and we needed to kind of bring that forward and figure out where is that coming from. Whereas, noticing that this is unpleasant, let's figure it out. Where the other side, talking about this top down, is what are we as a teacher or a supervisor, whomever, what are we going into a situation and looking for? And we do that as coaches, and we do that in our classrooms a little bit, saying, let's do, what are our look fors? And there's a couple of things about this ratio of it does feel like a skill, because I started reflecting about my own classroom, going, it was always just jumping in and correcting behavior, it felt like, which then is a negative piece. But also needed, though, right? We have to make sure we have a safe environment in some of those things. But that idea of thinking about these, we're going to look down here, and I want to notice, and I'm going to call out things when you are organizing ELA folks, you're organizing your writing structure correctly. Is that a thing? I hope. Okay. You're nodding your head. Yes. Thank you. So, we take risks here. We become vulnerable here on this podcast as well. So, but those ideas and just thinking about, what are we doing while we interact with kids that help us understand there? So that was one of my questions that I threw out to the group here. So, in your role, or you can bring it personal and things what you did, whatever you want to do. Where have you noticed where, teachers or yourself intentionally noticed and names the student's strengths in a situation, or an effective learning strategy, or things like that? Because, as you call them out, just like, we as believe in a belief system, their belief starts increasing as well a little bit more. So where have you seen that or noticed that? Maybe you've done it, or you've had to work on it. I had to work on it a ton, because it was just like, as a first year teacher, my mentor, bless his heart, said, you got to get control of your classroom, and it's all about classroom management. And I took that as they have to be quiet and sit down and behave. And that did not go well Stefan has brought up some of those things, I think, before about his first year teaching and things. But I'm just going to pause here and think about what are some things that you've noticed or teachers that are intentionally noticing and calling out that has been something more of that top-down idea, like, positive interactions or positive behaviors.
Well, it's not an academic example, but it makes me think of my kids, right? I've got a 3 and a 7-year-old now. And who, for the record, this is not a way to keep your podcast evergreen, but my 6 turning 7-year-old was so crazy excited last Monday when he realized that it was his 6-7 birthday. That whole,
oh gosh,
man,
did you just throw it out there?
The whole thing. But it makes me think of those two, because, 2 boys, and our one of our primary focuses right now as parents is getting them to like each other and play with each other. And, and especially with our 3-year-old who, toddler, bundle of terror and chaos and relatively good natured, but just raw emotion. And so a lot of what we do is reactive, and it's we feel like we're, trying to catch up into that, be proactive and those types of things. But, just thinking of that bottom up attention, you can't help but notice when he's screaming, or he's grabbed something he's not supposed to, or he's trying to touch the stove or whatever, right? Like, there's some things you just can't help but notice. And what we're trying to do a better job of is, I guess, what you would describe as top-down attention, where we're recognizing things that they do that we want to encourage. There was an example just yesterday, because our 7-year-old, he's very sweet, and he's a very good older brother. And still trying to figure out where those boundaries are. And so, it was like just yesterday, he offered something to our 3-year-old that he wasn't using, or he wanted, or he voluntarily split something that he really wanted and shared it with his younger brother. And so, Anna, my wife and I, we jumped all over that with that was, and we try to use intentional language as opposed to good job. We'll say things like, that was very kind. That was a great big brother move. Look how happy you made him, right? Really intentionally call out that positive behavior, or the behavior we want to encourage and that he's engaging in. We're not as good with it with our 3-year-old. And the pessimist in me will say, because there's fewer opportunities, because he's 3 and he's a psychopath. But if we're being honest, I think it's harder for him, not impossible, but harder for him to receive that feedback, right? Because there's still those opportunities there. So I guess not having a classroom, I see this play out a lot more with my 2 pretty young kids in the house quite a bit.
We also want to add on a little bit of where they've noticed some either classroom or personal, where you're calling out some strengths or learning behaviors.
Well, I think it's also a really important part of building a classroom community when you have students that are having a really hard time connecting with anybody, and the rest of the students notice how you treat them, how you look at them. So when you can find things to praise them publicly, I think the rest of the students notice that, and it can make a huge difference
Awesome,
in the lives of that child and your community.
Yeah, Terry brings up that. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, I'm just thinking of just to play off the opposite of that. In one of the videos I use in my trainings, the woman is talking about how the teacher's calling out the student's name all the time, right? So, Stefan, sit down. Stefan, be quiet. Stefan, get over here. Stefan, keep your hands to yourself, right? And so I'm looking at Stefan. And so the woman says, not only did this child learn that this was not a safe, nurturing, loving environment for him, but all the other kids learned how to treat him. Right. So just like Terry said, right. If we treat our students positively, even those kids who are those connection seeking kids, right, then the other kids will treat them positively. But if we don't, if we treat them negatively, all the other kids will learn how to treat. Stefan, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just very powerful, I think, to think about that, because we don't always think as adults in the room that we're impacting kids that way, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're bringing up that next point. Oh, sorry, Carrie, did you want to say something? My bad.
Oh, I was just going to add onto what Shanna was just sharing in my own classroom. And this, we might want to cut this out because it could be wrong. But I had a student that was very disruptive, and it was attention seeking, and I knew it was attention seeking. And he and I set up a behavior plan. And I won't go into that, but I do remember the other students in the class noticing that I allowed more from this other student than I allowed from the rest of the class. And I remember just pausing, one day when they're like, you would never let us do, whatever it was that I had allowed this other student to do. And I just said, do you not think that this student had a really great day today? That was really good for him. We got to go through this lesson and he didn't interrupt us 18 times. I just told the kids, I go, you're right. I wouldn't allow that from the rest of you guys, but today he had a really good day. And that's why I rewarded him or allowed whatever it was that I allowed. But I just remember, and I'm connecting to what Shanna said, and Terry said, the other kids they notice how you treat the students in your classroom. And there's always this equal and equitable and these different words thrown out there. But in my mind, I was doing that. Even though I was treating him differently, I still was trying to reward what I could, even though it probably wasn't what I wanted from everybody. But we were baby stepping toward better, is how I saw it in my mind. So,
Well, and that's a perfect, right? Because kids have such a finely tuned sense of what's fair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
especially middle schoolers.
Yeah. And they're so quick to point out how come they got to do that and I didn't get to do that, and having to take the time. Again, I deal with this all the time with my 6-year-old. It's or 7-year-old. I don't have the time, or I don't fully know how to articulate to you right now about why it's okay in this scenario, right? Versus for this person versus, so-and-so to do something different here. Right. But we try to get through that, but even articulating that and to middle schoolers, right? It's tricky. And I don't think students are thinking in that mode all the time, right? Because, and I taught middle school, love middle schoolers. And so I say this with love. They are some of the most self-centered creatures on the planet, aggressively so, right? The world, by and large, revolves around them because they're not empathetic thinkers. And so I remember a student, similarly, but a student who had had Crohn's disease in my class, and so uninhibited use of the bathroom all the time, no matter what. I had a bathroom policy in my classroom, and this student could go whenever they needed, just medical reasons. And so I remember a student asked, how come Stefan gets to go all the time? And I remember kind of not brushing off, but saying, everybody needs something a little bit different, and Stefan needs access to the bathroom whenever they need it, and you don't, and kids are receptive to that. I think it does come down to the relationship, right? You probably had that conversation with your students, and even being vulnerable and honest with them and saying, don't you think so-and-so had a really good day today? If anything, stops and will spark some reflection of hopefully they would lead themselves down the path of, I can't do that because it's not appropriate for me to do that. But they are aware enough, given the time and the space, to make some of those connections.
Yeah. You guys are everyone's talking about that next little chunk of the chapter 2 around connections being made and the importance of those connections being made. And so the chapter moves into this idea of these are important the connections are important for the kids to start thinking about themselves in whatever situation, from parents to teachers. There's a guy out of here. I've never heard of this. University of Washington. Anyone? I don't know. It must be somewhere in Washington. Go Cougs, by the way. but talked about setting up this idea of like filming interactions and connections being made of people in like over a period of time in their apartment, and how those are important. And he talks about this idea of a bid, or this idea that whatever a question, a gesture, something that is laying out the idea that I want to make a connection to you. And so how, and in his research, they talk a little bit about how they noticed all of these different variables of the healthy relationships in this videoing of people staying in the apartment over a 12-hour chunk of time. The ones that were critical were the ones that were acting about making those, coming out and asking a gesture, a touch, or a suggestion, or an idea that I want to connect with you and have these conversations. And the shift to us around the classroom level, what does this mean for education, is where are we making those emotional connections with there's also a little bit of chunk here about parents. If they're not connecting with their kids, they're not giving those bids or those ideas like, hey, I'm curious about your day, or I'm interested to hear how it went. The kids will look at that, and maybe they won't be able to develop their emotions around discussing their feelings and how do the social skills of interaction to share some ideas. And if they're not getting it at home, and then they come to the class and we're not even trying to make connections as teachers, like standing out in the hallway, hello, greeting, or, being mindful of what that looks like, and really get to this point of this chapter, like witnessing the good, then the students are going to feel that they don't have a connection to the learning environment in here, and then they won't be engaged, and then they won't have some success in your classroom. And that, like, the idea of like students, if they're not connected, they won't be engaged to learn. And then we wonder why, gosh, these kids they're not getting it. Well, because we haven't made a set up that environment of that community building that you talk that this whole section's about. So I am,
what it makes me think of, because when we had Ashley and we were talking about learning friendly environment, whatever the first one was, we asked her a little bit about, from like an admin's perspective, building a positive learning environment, like in your building with adults. And just especially, I mean, who knows when people are listening to this, but like December 1st, 2025 right now, this time of year is tough for teachers, right? Like you've got that slope of like teacher affect and what's the word I'm looking for? Like, what is the word I'm looking for?
I think in the graph I've seen it's disillusionment, right?
There you go.
Where we're like disillusioned.
Yes. And so like now's the time, like you're down, weather's turning, days are shorter, right? Yep. And especially recently, or just kind of for a long time, teachers kind of get dumped on, like everybody's got an opinion about education because everyone's gone through it. Everyone thinks they know. And from like a media literacy standpoint in the technology world, and Shanna will know more about this than I would, but like specifically around things like social media, or it's emotions that drive engagement and conversation. And the strongest one is like anger and resentment. And it's way easier to go out and, I mean, I guess that would be that bottom up piece. Notice when things are wrong, things that are, and it kind of gives us like, we feel power from that sense to like point out when things are going wrong. So how often do teachers hear that what they're doing wrong? So much so that it'd be interesting to hear if you guys get this impression as well, but every now and then I'll be like leading trainings that people haven't opted into. So not like at the STEM Summit, because people are voluntarily going there, but like, I'll be in a district and we're leading a training. And every now and then, about 50% of the time, like you have to be aware of the environment in the room, because there's this almost subtext that teachers feel like they need to be there because they're doing something wrong, when that is not the case by any means. I literally had a teacher tell me that last year as we were doing some standards work. They said, are we doing something wrong? It's like, no, you're here because your district is doing things right? This is the work. We all just need to grow professionally. But I think, especially in education, teachers are so used to hearing like what they're doing wrong and what needs to be improved that we do not stop and take the time to identify things that are going really, really well.
For example, yesterday, walking through Walmart, we see a teacher at our 7-year-old school, and she just goes, "Hey, you know who I'm on the phone with right now?" And it's his teacher. She just happened to be talking on the cell phone to his teacher. And so she like put her on speakerphone, and here she is asking my 7-year-old about his birthday and telling him things about school and what he missed because he was out last week because we traveled for his birthday and Thanksgiving. And like that, like Anna and I walked away just hearts so full because here is clearly on a Sunday a woman who cares about her kids, is in the know for like these little things. She's got like 25 kids in her class, and here she is taking some time to talk to him, and like that made his day. He was so excited, but that's not the first thing on people's brains when they think about education, right? It's always like, where are our test scores and how can we be doing better? And I think those things are important, but I think they dominate the conversation a little bit. So like, I know we're talking about what that looks like in our classroom, but I also think there's an element of this with like witnessing the good with our peers and our colleagues and our PLC members, because we know schools are a community, and when that community is functioning well, students learn better.
Yeah. So Kathy and I were in a district. Terry and I had been in this building the day before, and then Kathy and I were in the same building the next day. And middle school teacher, veteran teacher, he even told us, 30 plus years he's been working. He called us into his classroom because he wanted to show us that he had those sentence stems, language frames up on his screen at the front of the room. And the kids were turning and talking to each other about science class, right? And those cross, now I forgot my word, Carrie, I'm looking right at you. Cross content connections. What was it? What is science?
The cross-cutting concepts.
Cross-cutting concepts, right? So he's talking to us about that. But you could just hear this hum in the classroom because the kids were turning and talking to each other. And he was so proud that he had put those language frames up there that he called Kathy and I in to see that in his classroom, right? I mean, that was so, so powerful because I don't think that he normally has sentence stems for his kids, to promote that oral language and that discourse. So, yeah, so powerful.
Nice.
That we notice the good.
Yeah, I'm gonna highlight something, and we're gonna try to share a video here. And if you're reading the book, they have some companion website that accesses some video here. So this is off of chapter 14. It's Lori Sinclair is going to talk a little bit about being a witness to the good. So I hope there's a lot of audio and not just visual. So it's only 2 minutes. So we'll see how this goes in this format. But I'm going to make sure I have all the sound and all that stuff going. So give me a thumbs up if this is happening here. But just this is going to be a little a chance for the author and then Lori Sinclair to talk a little bit, and then we'll go and wrap up the remaining part of this chapter. Okay. So the couple things I want to, everyone hear that okay? As I did. Yep. Okay, awesome. A couple things I want to highlight there is the idea of a look for coaching model there. Like, hey, come in and like how we could support a teacher to say, hey, I'll keep track of some your positive interactions in the classroom. Sometimes it might be like on task, at task, and that's more of a behavior. But this idea of shifting it, saying, hey, how often did you comment and say hello or engage with kids? And there's a form here, a couple ideas in our text that talk about, figure 14.1 talks a little bit about how we can increase or ways to catch behavior, varying your methods of praise, emailing or calling parents. That was one thing I try to do like during conference time is calling parents and just saying, hey, man, really had a great week with your student today or this week, et cetera, et cetera. And they're like, usually they would go, but they didn't do anything or it was like caught them off guard because there is that whenever we hear from the school, it's usually not very positive. So how do we change that culture? And I think Lori here mentioned that too. No, I want the kids to be I want my classroom to be a space where they can hang out a little bit and they feel comfortable being there. And we talked about that, building that community here, this whole last section or season that we've been podcasting. So I thought that was kind of a nice way of hearing from the author and someone to say, like, I noticed that ratio was 10-1 of positives to negative attributes or whatever it was. And, and that idea, like, that would be a good starting point to really say, how do I interact with my kids? So if you are in your growth, your TPEP or your, like you mentioned, the best work, Terry, like as a new teacher, like that might be a nice, easy step in for us to help support. Like, how are you interacting with your kids? Because now my mindset is to be changing, like, okay, I'm not looking for correction behavior, so I'm looking for positive pieces here. So I thought that was neat. And the last thing I want to bring up and I'm going to try to read right from this text because the author is something that we want to kind of highlight here a little bit more. But this idea of when I say, hey, Stefan, man, you're I really appreciate how generous you are, right? And how that comes off of, like, you're probably thinking right now, Stefan, like, I already know how generous I am, right? Like I've just mentioned something, and you could either say he's not right or he's not wrong.
You're clearly correct. I am so generous.
So in saying, like, I know that if you're a kind person, Carrie, right? Well, Carrie's already questioning what that means to her. So instead of saying, or you're a hard worker, right? We're already questioning that comment and just tweaking that statement, saying, I bet you put a lot of work into this paper. I can really tell, or that artwork, or some of those ideas. So maybe, instead of saying, the way you complimented Shanna today really encouraged her. So, like, that's, how we change those. That's a kind interaction, but we called it out a little bit differently instead of saying, like, it's, we want to have it towards a general attribute, not, you want to call out the general attribute, not like it's leaning into that attribute, if that makes sense. I don't know if that. So, like, I really wanted to, hey, Stefan, the way that you set up today's meeting and brought it all together, I think was really powerful versus saying, hey, you're a really good organizer.
Well, that latter one would be a straight up lie. So
yeah, because I let it out there. I let it out to be a lie because you're already saying, oh my gosh, this morning we were scrambling. So how we tweaked it, we'd say, hey, this morning we got all 5 of us together. We're now moving forward. Man, really good job of organizing things. Yeah. And you're like, that was true. Yeah. It was a true statement. Whereas now if I left it the other way and say, hey, great job organizing today, you'd be like, oh, dude, we were scrambling. We had no idea. We forgot to tell Terry and Shanna and all these. Oh, we shifted the whole thing. Or hey, thanks you all for being flexible. Are we? Well, no, thank you all for shifting your calendars and moving forward. All of those things. So just that tweak, I've been really thinking about that a little bit, and how, like, we sometimes those positive intentions there, if we just shift it a little bit more, those kids then can say, no, that behavior that I had, I should continue to do it. I don't understand what it means to be generous, or I'm making my own definition of what is to be kind, versus, like, thank you for grabbing the person's coat as it fell off the coat rack. That was very kind. Those kinds of things. So
I just think, Andy, Terry, I think Andy just needs to come to our GLAD trainings, right?
Hey, I've been to a couple GLAD trade. I've been to the GLAD trainings.
But it's so true. I mean, we talk about, we want kids to be kind and be respectful. And if we just use those words and don't describe to them what they did to be respectful, right? So in our GLAD training and all the trainings I do to support our parent educators, I always say, because Terry taught me this, your favorite name, your favorite word, your brain's favorite word is your name. So by saying the name of the person first, right? So Terry, thank you for being willing to be here today. That was being really respectful of our time and your time, right? whatever. So, but it's you say the student's name and you say what they did, and then connect that kind of that behavior expectation, whether it's safe or kindness or respectful, or solving problems, right? Because we can't, kids won't, Stefan, you have a 7-year-old. Does he really know what it means to be respectful?
If you watched him for an hour, you'd say no.
But he does know, but we have to continue to teach kids what are the actions that show that flexibility, that respectfulness. They don't come with it. So we have, it's our job to make sure that we're continually reinforcing that. But I just like what Andy said. I love that, Andy. So how do we shift the praise?
Yeah. And the text gives us a couple tools that we can use too, like that ratio of there's a T chart that, where if we are observing, or even maybe as a PLC, like asking your, accountability buddies that we've used here before, like saying this idea, hey, Terry, come watch me teach for a while, and then just make marks of when I was reinforcing versus when I was correcting. And that right there, what a great conversation starter. Like, hey, you're 50-50, how did that feel? What these are the things you said, these are the things that we're correcting. Well, that's a great way of just being that mindset shift of saying, I'm going to be growing versus always just shutting things down or whatever. So I thought there's a couple ways doing. There's a seating chart idea where, tally marking kind of a thing, like who you were actually reinforcing or who you were actually correcting. That might be another good conversation that you had. So, or a tool that you could use, just if you wanted to kind of consider this idea about witnessing the good within our students. So any other thoughts out there that you want to add on before we do our final?
Well, I was just thinking too about, how we interact with our students, right? And what questions we ask them. So when we're watching a student do math and it's solving a math problem, and if we ask the question, why did you solve it that way? What is the first initial reaction of the student? If I ask why, they think, oh, I must have done it wrong, right? So instead of saying, why did you do it that way? Explain to me how you did that, right? Can you tell your partner how you solved the problem? So again, it's how shifting the language and the way we ask the questions and the way we prompt our students are very similar to, we have to change our language when we're interacting with the kids. And we also need to, watch our language and how we're using it when we're interacting with each other and supporting each other in our work, in our PLC. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, I think the only other thing that's lingering in my brain is that if we're talking about like a learner-friendly culture or environment, like clearly the teacher needs to lead by example, and we've talked a lot about that. But I think I know that there are opportunities to put these tools in the hands of kids as well. Right. And so I like the idea of starting by small shifts in our own practices. So those little things like just taking data on, how often you're praising, reinforcing, being very intentional about the specificity of the kind of feedback, or those are small little shifts that take like no effort, just a little bit of focus and attention. So if you're looking to take something away and just do it literally in the next hour, I'm going to go try it on my wife and see how that works. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I like that. Like, I like those small shifts. I think, Shanna, you said it earlier, that those things need to be taught to kids specifically. And it's something that we haven't recorded yet because we're recording out of order. But this afternoon, when we record with Bill around chapter 13, expectations, one of the questions I have prepped for him, or for Andy, Carrie, and him, is common pushback on these types of things is, especially at secondary, I shouldn't have to teach kids this. They should already know it. They should already know how to be nice to each other. They should already know how to get up across the room and go sharpen their pencil. And yeah, maybe by the time you hit 10th grade, you should already know that. If they're not doing it, then it needs to be addressed. And so just saying, I shouldn't have to teach kids this and wiping your hands of it, it's something they should have learned in first grade, how to be nice to each other. It's something that I see a lot of adults need work with, right? So you can never do that too much. And it doesn't have to be these huge monumental shifts. But I think that a step to this is a small shift in providing students intentional time to engage in this work as well. I mean, how awesome would that be to fold into an academic lesson around specificity of feedback?
Yes.
You know, like as opposed to good job on your writing. You know, I really liked your topic sentence is strong because, and then they use the language on the rubric. Right?
Mhm.
That's just good. When my biggest pet peeve as a professional is when I ask for feedback or I give feedback, and the feedback I'm giving is looks good. I kick myself every single time.
Yep.
Let's try that again.
Yeah.
You know, or if I genuinely cannot think of something to give feedback for, I will apologize first. I'm sorry I'm about to give this feedback, but I think this looks excellent. You know, like move, but I know I'm not helping with that. And so when I ask for feedback and someone says, looks good, or I get feedback on a professional development that says, awesome job, that's nice. It's not feedback, it's a compliment, you know?
Yeah.
And so and there's a time and place for those things for sure. But I think the point I'm trying to make is shifting this, giving the power to students to do this type of stuff and the tools and the time to be able to engage in it, I think is really important.
Yeah. Awesome.
Feedback for me needs to be, if it's 2 words, it should be 2 sentences. Right? Good job, man. That needs to be 3 sentences. What did they do a good job on? And what, you know, we in elementary, we have things like 3 stars and a wish, right? Which is kind of, I'm being facetious, but really kids need to hear, you did this well, now go work on, right? Whatever. And so if we just give good job, when we went to see, oh gosh, what's his name? The guy from New Zealand, Hattie. We saw John Hattie, right? We saw John Hattie in person. And he said, the kids know. If you give Stefan the treatment, the feedback, good job, Stefan. And then you say to Andy, I really like the way that you constructed your paragraph. Can you go back and add some more detail? The kids know that the teacher is more invested in Andy than he is in Stefan, right? So be judicious and careful about your feedback and make sure that you're giving the same type of feedback to all of your kids. Because if you just say good job to some of them and then really give good feed forward to others, just like we were talking earlier about, you know, the way we talk to them, the kids know, they even with feedback. So
nice. Well, the wrap up here again, and when you're saying about that idea about pencil sharpening, is like we should do a training once and say, okay, we're going to go outside. We're all going to play cricket. So you guys figure out what position you want to play, and you guys get out there, and we'll meet you outside. And they'll be like, "Oh, we don't know how to play. Wait, you don't know how to play cricket? You don't understand the rules of cricket? Like I don't even understand." But like the same idea, like you don't know how to factor, you don't know how to write a conclusion, you know, all of the. Well, then we need to teach and explain and the rules of cricket and and then we can go out and play it. You know, it's one of those like I don't know if it's like you said the time and like everyone has that idea, but those expectations and those things that we talk witnessing the good, thinking about those ratios in the back, like just like every other chapter, they talk about how do we take these ideas and implement them into action. You know, they talk about some student suggestions, and the one thing I loved about the student idea is giving them tasks or examples or things that they have to show some things and that you can then acknowledge and call out some of those pieces. The teacher ones, these are the ones I hated, but maybe like recording yourself, videoing yourself, and then reflecting back. I'm like, oh man, talk about being open-minded and reflective. That was kind of an idea, but just, you know, record yourself and take a look about how many times you said these things that talked about of like reinforcing or correcting. We've mentioned a lot of the instructional coaches part, but also maybe suggesting as we get our admin group, and we can maybe bring up when we have our Bill or Ashley back in those conversations, like just maybe having these as a focus on what I could be as an instructional leader in the room. And that's a nice little, if it's a TPEP idea or whatever, just like, let's keep track of how we're having these conversations and what does attention look like. And Are you just correcting behavior, or have you even suggested that what you noticed was a positive attribute, et cetera? So, or reinforcing those pieces. So there's a ton of stuff in here that I know is going to connect to our next section with Carrie on fluent corrections. But the last piece here is like, well, how would some of these strategies influence that overall culture in a classroom? What are some thoughts that you are thinking about now? Like if we really implement this, how would that affect the overall classroom culture? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's important that whatever it is, it won't be overnight. Like there's no quick fixes in education. So I think long term, after consistent implementation of habits, you might start seeing some impacts. And I think the easy answer, like I'll cop out with the easy answer is how will it impact the classroom positively, right? Like that type of stuff is infectious. I think we might have said that in the first section of the book that we covered, where emotions are infectious, and doesn't mean you're going to have all good days all the time, right? It's still a classroom. You're still going to have your ups and downs.
Yep. But
on like the law of averages, like when you're having a bad day, if we had more time, we're going to wrap up here in a second. But if we had more time, I'd tell you the story about the affirmation wall I used to have in my classroom, and like providing opportunities for that and establishing that culture just creates opportunities for things that you didn't plan. So I think, how is this going to impact your overall culture? I think it's going to start to leave your hands. If done right, it's like then out of your control, which is good. You've created something good and self-sustaining that is bigger than you.
Nice. Well, thank you, Terry. Thank you, Shanna, for joining us for this Chapter 4 conversation. It was great to have the lenses that you bring. And if there's other thoughts there, interact with the folks on our Canvas course to take a look at some of their thoughts too. But witnessing the good in our kiddos and you brought forward too, Stefan, of like the people that we work with too, like, calling out those, reinforcing that good ethic or that good working or that positive behaviors that we want to keep growing in as professionals. So awesome job. Great chapter. Thank you all for the conversations.
Thanks for learning with us today. If something we said sparked a thought, made you nod, or something Andy said made you roll your eyes, we'd love to hear about it. Share the episode, tag a colleague, send it to your PLC, or just keep the conversation going within your own team. You can connect with us via the feedback form in the show notes, and we'd love to hear your thoughts, feedback, and suggestions for topics to cover in future episodes. We're all growing together, and that starts with paying attention to our own practice.